Okay, well, I think we can kickstart. So probably, yeah, since it's a Sunday, I think people may join in a little later, but we don't want to wait any further. So we can kickstart. So since I'm traveling, I cannot share my video. So apologies for that. So but we can kickstart. But maybe I think I can see Satish. Maybe if you can confirm, you can clear me louder and clear. You can just type in clear in the box so that I can get to know. Okay, so my voice is clear. And I think we can start sharing the screen. Get started. Okay, perfect. Thanks for the confirmation, Satish. I think people may come in, but I think without waiting further, since this entire session is going to be recorded, so it is getting recorded, so people can watch the recording as well. So without any further delay, we can get started. So let me share my screen. Well, I hope my screen is visible. Can you, Satish, can you confirm again if you're able to see my screen as well? That will be helpful. You can type in S. Yeah, okay. Perfect. Okay, let's get started. So let me share the presentation quickly. Okay, so I think let me just click on present. Okay, cool. Let's get started. See, before we dive into the fabric mirroring, so we will set some expectations, right? So that you know what we will go through in this 1 hour session. Maybe we can stretch a bit, let's say probably 10 or 15 minutes extra. That's not a problem. If you have more questions, I will try and answer those questions at the end of the session. So we will have the Q&A towards the end of the session. So please reserve your questions if you have any once the content is fully presented. So please feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A box in the last 10-15 minutes, and then we will go through those questions and I'll try and answer. So if I'm not able to, then I'll be very transparent with you. I will go and do some research and come back to you if there is any question which I cannot answer right away. Okay, so that should be fine, right? So I think with respect to fabric mirroring, so what we are going to go through in this particular session is we will look at what is mirroring, why we need to go for mirroring, why Microsoft introduced this capability in first place. And I think there are several limitations as well if you take any workload. So there are many workloads that you can mirror in Fabric. Okay, so but for the scope of this session, we will purely look at Azure SQL DB mirroring, okay, because I cannot take you through everything, okay, because there is Cosmos DB mirroring, there are other capabilities like open mirroring, but we will look at different types of mirroring, but I cannot take you through all of the capabilities. No, we can focus on Azure SQL DB mirroring. We can do a quick demo how you can mirror it. And once the mirroring is done, whether it is near real time and how you can monitor in case if there is any sync issues, how we can troubleshoot it. So all those aspects with respect to Azure SQL DB, we will be focusing on that. So it's purely Azure SQL DB. We will focus on it. And then we will look at the limitations. There could be limitations with respect to every workload, right? So, but for Azure SQL DB, what are the different prerequisites that you need to make sure before you even pitch into the mirroring hit on mirroring itself, right? So there are some prerequisites we will quickly go through, and we will look at the limitations. There is a max 500 tables limit that you can mirror. You cannot do more than that. So there are some limitations around workloads, especially for Azure SQL DB. We will see what are those limitations as well. So this session is going to be purely, kind of keeping in mind how in an enterprise setup if you're trying to mirror your Azure SQL DB, what are the different things you need to take care? And kind of in a real world, it's always messy, right? So you cannot expect a smooth transition, right, or smooth migration. So even in case of mirroring, also there could be challenges coming up. After mirroring, you cannot see the tables coming up. The latest tables, future tables not syncing properly. So how you can troubleshoot that? So those are the aspects from an enterprise organizational perspective we need to go through. Otherwise, the conceptual learning alone will not help you to take you anywhere. So we need to understand thoroughly the troubleshooting part, limitations part, so that you will be kind of a bit confident on how you can navigate through this in case if you get a project or if you want to mirror your Azure SQL DB in a real-time setting in your tenant, right? So we will go through that. So in Data Beyond, I think a bit about Data Beyond. So our mission is to help you to bridge that gap between theoretical knowledge and the practical application. So every content that I produce, even in YouTube or in my LMS teachable platform, if the courses we have produced is all end-to-end, with the focus on having the hands-on, not only the theoretical content presenting the slides. The same applies to this session as well. I'm not going to take you through every slide and then leave it. So we will go through some of the slides, understand the conceptual walkthrough, and then dive into the fabric to see how we can do some hands-on and set up the mirroring itself. Okay, so I think let's get started. So I hope the expectations is clear. Maybe if you have any questions, feel free to drop in the chat and stop me. But if you have any questions related to technical stuff, please wait till the end because there is a lot to cover in this session. So you may have a lot of questions. There is a FAQ, frequently asked questions out there in the documentation as well. We will go through that as well so that you may have some questions and that will be answered in the process. So please wait till the end for Q&A. I know you will definitely have a lot of questions during the session. So please wait for that. Okay, so let me move on. So we will a quick introduction about me. So Sheikh Mohammed, and I'm a Microsoft certified trainer, cloud data architect, and I'm the founder and CEO of Data Beyond Academy. So I have close to 15 plus years of industry experience. So recently I came out of TCS, ex-TCS, and right now I'm focusing on purely the academy and the cloud solutions division in my startup. So I have trained close to 500 plus students across India and Europe, and I'm an expert in Fabric, Azure, Power BI, and real-time data modeling. So you can ask me any questions, and probably it's like we are kind of I would say there is a lot to learn from each one of us. So on daily basis, the product does keep on evolving, be it whatever product, Azure or Fabric. So they keep on evolving. So so we need to have that beginner mindset. So to learn the new things coming along in the technology landscape, right? And as I said, my mission is to help you to turn you into a confident professional through the structured, the real world learning with hands-on experience. Okay, that's all I'm focusing on in my academy, right? So that's a bit about me. So let's jump on to the topic right away. So let me move on. Okay, so let's talk about what is mirroring, right? So what is actually mirroring? So it's a low cost and low latency solution to bring your data from various systems together into a single analytics platform. In this case, our Fabric unified platform, right? When I say low cost, we will see why we say low cost, right? So the Fabric compute is completely free for you. They're not going to charge you anything for mirroring. But with respect to the storage, I think based on your capacity tier, so I think you come in with some bit of knowledge, the foundational knowledge like capacity, tenant. I'm not going to go through the foundational concepts here. Maybe I have a course in my free course in my YouTube channel or in my teachable platform. You can go through that. So I've covered the foundational concepts in detail. But this session, we are not going to go into the details of the foundation, like what is tenant, what is capacity, and workspace, stuff like that, right? But I assume you have some knowledge about the capacity tiers and all. So when I say the cost is like a lower, or they provide you based on the capacity tier limit. If you have F64, let's say, so you will have 64 TB of storage. Okay, so for your mirroring capability. So I think we will go through that, but I think the compute is completely free. So that's why we are saying it's going to be a low cost solution for your organization and low latency because it's near real time. Um, and the replication happens almost instantly, okay, near real time. So the continuous replication of your source systems into OneLake happens. Okay, so it's near real time. Okay, so you don't need to worry about it, but you need to make sure the syncing is happening perfectly all right. If there are any sync issues, there could be something you need to take care of, which we'll talk about in the coming slides and the Microsoft documentation. And I cannot put everything in my slides, so it'll be a high level overview, and then we'll jump onto the Microsoft documentation, also switch back and forth to show you a lot of things that you need to take care of, right? So I cannot bring in everything into my slide as well. Okay, so I think it's automated near real-time sync, as I mentioned, into a Delta Lake format because OneLake is as you know, like it's purely in Delta Lake format, Parquet format that we store in Parquet format. Okay, the columnar follow storage that you may be aware. So I think it's near real time, which is cool. Okay, and it also eliminates the need for custom ETL pipelines. It's like a zero ETL approach. But I think there is a catch. Okay, so there is a comparison deck slide I have. We will talk about it when you need to go for data flows Gen 2 or when you need to go for mirroring. Because you may have a question. It may not be necessarily zero ETL all the time. You may need to do some transformations down the line, right, in your pipeline, and you cannot go for mirroring all the time, right? So we will talk about that, the comparison between the data flows or pipelines that you're going to build with some transformations, and mirroring is kind of a zero ETL approach, and when you need to go for that. So that kind of a comparison, we will go through that, but it basically eliminates the need for complex ETLs. If you need to bring in your data into your OneLake, into Fabric from different source systems. So that's the idea, okay, mirroring is all about at a very high level. But we will talk about that comparison and all in the coming slide. Okay, so let me move on. So why mirroring, right? So why we need mirroring in the first place? So if you think about it, so almost in any organization, if you take, right, so they have mission critical operational or all analytical data, the data sitting in silos. So they wanted to make sense of their data, but the data is around, I know, in silos in different departments. They can't unify their data, you can call it, or they wanted to build a unified platform or unify the data and then generate some reports out of it. So they're still struggling. They wanted to build some complex ETL pipelines to bring in their data. Even to copy, they need to have a copy pipeline, right? Simple copy also, right? Uh, so I think it's a kind of long wait times they need to trade off to create data pipelines and put some processes around it to critically important data they wanted to analyze, right? So the operational data they wanted to do some analytics on top of it. So that's when Microsoft, okay, so came up with this technology called mirroring. So wherein they reduce this complex ETL approaches, and they wanted to get rid of those ETL pipelines at all, and get the data as quick as possible for analytical needs for the organization. So that's the idea, core idea, you can say. And there is no freedom to use if you look at the problem areas, right? So use the tools you need to analyze and share insights comfortably. But Fabric, as you know by now, it's a game changer from Microsoft. It's a unified platform. Uh, they are kind of providing a unified experience. So you no need to move out of it. It's a SaaS experience. So you can unify all of your data from disparate source systems and then make sense of your data right within Fabric in a unified platform. And there is this concept called, so this is a part of OneLake series, right? So we are talking about mirroring and we are trying to bring in the data into OneLake. So it's a OneDrive for organization, as you may have already heard about it, right? So OneLake is beautiful. So it's like you can bring in all of your data, unify in one single lake, and I think put some controls around it. And I think in the next video, I think maybe in the next subsequent session next week, we talk about OneLake security purely. And I've already produced video in my channel around it a couple of days back, and we dive deep into the OneLake security as a part of the OneLake series. So there's a lot to learn, I would say, with respect to OneLake, especially the mirroring concept, OneLake security. I think security is crucial aspect, I would say, because in any enterprise organization, you need to put a lot of controls at different security layers like workspace, items, or let's say now Microsoft is introducing the data access roles like RBAC role, which is in limited preview. Okay, that's not in the scope of this session, but I'm just giving you a heads up so that you can expect what's coming up in the subsequent webinars. Okay, we'll talk about it. And I think there is a lot of friction, obviously, between people, process, and technology to collate everything and then put together all of the pipelines and build the systems around. It's not easy, right? So that's when Microsoft wanted to build this technology mirroring to ease this process, okay, and bring your data as quick as possible for your organization to make some sense of data for their analytical needs, right? So I hope that's clear, the what and why of mirroring. That's a bit about it, but we will go through it one by one. Okay, so any questions around it, please keep it, reserve it for end of the session. I'll come to it. So let's move on. So we will stop. We'll go through to some part of the slide deck, and then we'll stop, and then we'll jump to Fabric portal, because and I don't want to be like a pure theoretical session. As I told you, focus is on hands-on. Okay, right. So let's talk about the different types of mirroring, right? So what are the different types of mirroring that you can do? So one is like database mirroring that we're going to look at in this session, a quick demo. So which is the Azure SQL DB. It's like a full table row by row replication. Okay, the entire database. I think you can do that, if you want to bring in your entire database, and then any future tables that you would create in the source systems needs to be replicated in OneLake. Okay, that's straightforward. What is metadata mirroring? So it's schema only. So I hope you have heard about shortcuts, right, in Fabric. I assume you may be aware about shortcuts. So that's exactly what is metadata mirroring, because we are going to put the schema only like a reference point in OneLake. Okay, I have a table somewhere else in my source system. I'm not going to duplicate or copy the data into my Fabric lake. Okay, OneLake. Instead, I'm just going to put a reference point that talks to the underlying source to bring the data. Okay, it's just the schema that you're going to apply. Okay, or you can think of it as a reference table, right? So, but the data still resides in the underlying source. We are not copying the data or duplicating the data, right? So it's only schema only. So that's what we call it as metadata mirroring. Okay. And I think open mirroring. What is open mirroring? See, once you have done the database mirroring, and once the replication is done and the mirroring is now happening, right? So in addition to that, you can bring in your data from your own application or public APIs into the mirrored database already. Okay, so that is one open mirroring for you. So you can bring in your data from your application or public ingestion APIs into the OneLake already mirrored database. Okay, so in addition to what you have already done, right? But I think for the scope of this session, I'm not going to get into detail on open mirroring. Maybe we will have that session in another opportunity dedicatedly. But for the scope of this session, we will look at the database mirroring part, how you can do that in Fabric. Okay, but there are three different types that you should be aware. It is not only the database mirroring. You can do shortcuts. You can do one open mirroring with public APIs and stuff like that. Okay, so I hope that's clear. Okay, let's just give me a moment. Okay, so let's go. I think there are people still joining. Okay, just wanted to have a look. Okay, but still it is getting recorded, so not an issue. Let me present so they can watch the recording later. That's fine. Okay, so types of mirroring. Okay, let's move on. I think we will go till setup, the artifacts and setup, and then we will jump onto Fabric. So, okay, so what are the different artifacts that would be, I mean, kind of created when you kind of mirror your database, right? So it is the mirrored database item. We call it as mirrored database item. Okay, so I'm going to show you that in Fabric how that is happening, and you will have your SQL Analytics endpoint. Okay, that is automatically created from Microsoft for you. Okay, so you no need to create that. So even if you create Lakehouse and other capabilities, the analytics endpoint and the default semantic model will be automatically created for you, these two artifacts. And why Microsoft is doing that? Because you will have a readily available SQL Analytics endpoint, so that you can write some T-SQL queries to start analyzing your data right away, right? And you can start building your data models right away for generating reports as well. Okay, and I think the data is stored as Delta in the mirrored folder in OneLake as well. So those are the different artifacts at a high level. What are all the items that gets generated when you create the Fabric mirroring, when you mirror the Fabric database itself. Okay, so with this, we will stop with the setup, and then we will move on to the Fabric portal. Okay, so what are the different things you need to keep in mind with respect to Azure SQL DB mirroring with setup? I think these are few which I have mentioned, but we will go through the prerequisites in documentation quickly. So the first thing which you need to make sure is you need to enable system assigned managed identity, SAMI, of your Azure SQL logical server. That is very, very, very important, because once you create, I'll tell you, I hope you're already aware. Otherwise, I'll talk a bit about what is managed identity, right? So once you enable it at the logical SQL Server level, that is required for Fabric to talk to Azure SQL Server to bring in the data. Otherwise, you will get an error when you try to mirror your database. That's the first thing you need to make sure your managed identity is switched on and it is readily, I mean, it is up and running. Okay. And I think the table must have primary key. I think it is only until April 2025. You know, there is a statement in Microsoft documentation. So I think after April 2025, there is no restriction around it. And I will show you that as well, whether they have this restriction currently that you need to mirror your DB tables. And there are different authentication mechanism that you can use, like OAuth 2 managed identity and SQL or SQL auth to connect to the your SQL Server and then bring in the data with the mirroring capability. And I think once you start mirroring, the initial latest snapshot will be taken, and then the continuous sync of any future tables will happen. And that is your responsibility to monitor and put some alerts around it. If the mirroring is happening, fine. Otherwise, we need to troubleshoot and see why the sync is not happening fine. Okay. So that being said, enough slides. Let me move on to Fabric Portal or the documentation to quickly look at the prerequisites. And then I'll also show you in the Azure portal. So here I'm in, okay, let me move this down a bit. Okay. Let us quickly go through the prerequisites. I'm going to jump to documentation as well, because I cannot put everything in slide as I mentioned. So we'll quickly walk through some of the prerequisites. Okay, so especially for the Azure SQL DB mirroring, and then we'll quickly move on to demo in Fabric Portal. Okay, so what are the prerequisites that you need to make sure, right? So there are different things you need to make sure. Okay, so I'm not going to read it line by line, but the key things I will let you know, and I will share the links, the documentation links, or you can Google it out and read a lot about it, in detail. But the key things is you need to have an existing capacity, be it trial. If you don't have a trial, you need to have a trial capacity enabled or a paid capacity. That's the first thing, right? So you need to make sure, otherwise you cannot work on any Fabric items. So that you need to have in place, right? And I think there are some information related to the database that you're going to mirror can either be a single or it should be in elastic pool. Okay, you can create a new database and then start mirroring, or you can use any of the existing database. And I think the Fabric's capacity, a couple of points related to capacity. So even if you have a paid capacity and if you have paused it, and it will affect mirroring and no data will be replicated. Even after mirroring, if you, let's say, if you say, okay, I'm incurring some cost for my Fabric capacity F64 or F32, whatever it is. And if you're trying to pause it for, let's say, 4 or 5 days, and if you expect the mirroring to happen, it won't, right? So you need the capacity to be active and running also. And I think with respect to role, right? So how you can mirror which role you require in an organization. So I think you need to be a member or admin at the moment in your workspace. At the workspace level, I think there are 4 different roles. Just to highlight, it is member, admin, contributor, and viewer. Those are the 4 different roles at the workspace level, right? That you can set. So you need to be at least a member or admin. If you're a contributor or viewer, you cannot mirror your Azure SQL database. You need to have the right role also. And also, as I mentioned, one critical thing is you need to enable the SAMI, right? The system assigned managed identity of your SQL server. And that must be the primary identity to take care of the mirroring. So let's quickly move on to the Azure portal before I jump on to, just give me a moment. Let me log in if you can allow me a minute. I'll show you how you can enable the system assigned managed identity in Azure SQL Database logical server, right? So let me log in right away. Give me a moment. Okay, so let me get into the portal and let me navigate to Azure. So I have this test DB 101, okay, SQL Server. So on the left side, If you just scroll down under security, you have to navigate to identity, and there you go. That's exactly what you need to enable. I think by default it won't be enabled. It will be in a switched off state. So when you switch it on, what happens in the backend is it will register your SQL Server as an application in the Entra ID. Okay, so it will create that entry in Entra ID, and then you can start kind of controlling the access to Azure SQL Server, right? So that's what is exactly mentioned here. You can see if you want to authenticate your SQL Server to cloud services, now Fabric needs to talk to SQL Server and SQL DB in our case for mirroring. So I need to enable system assigned managed identity. And the key thing is the lifecycle is also tied to the lifecycle of this resource. So in case if you're deleting the SQL Server and SQL DB for some reason, then the managed identity will also be deleted in the Entra ID. So that's tied to the lifecycle of this resource itself. Okay, and then you can start. So you're not going to store any credentials, right? So once enabled, you'll have all the required. You can grant the required permissions via the Azure RBAC role-based access control. Okay, and I don't have any user assigned identity and all. So this would be my primary identity. So that's exactly what Microsoft is mentioning. It should be your primary identity to publish the data to Fabric OneLake. So that's key thing. Otherwise, you may end up getting error if you're not enabling the system assigned managed identity. Okay, so that's the first thing which you need to keep in mind. And let me move on to the Fabric portal. So here I'm within the Fabric portal. Okay, so we already have a trial capacity running, which I have like 13 days left. If you already have a trial capacity, you can explore this capability, right? So let me move on to workspace. And I have a dedicated workspace called OneLake Deep Dives. Okay, so where I've already mirrored, okay, but I'm going to show you how we can do it from scratch. Okay, I'm not going to just leave it with whatever we already mirrored, but let me show you that. Okay, but I think when you're trying to, okay, so I think under workspace settings, you need to make sure your capacity is linked. So all those basic preliminary things you need to take care of it before we even jump onto the mirroring capability. Okay, so click on new item, right? And I think I've already put up favorites around some of the capabilities like that you can see, or if you go to all items, uh, you can see a lot of things that you can mirror. Okay, so under mirroring capability also. So it'll be like you can always search for mirror, and there you can see there are a lot of capabilities under mirroring, right? You can mirror SQL managed instance, you can mirror your Postgre and mirroring Azure Database Catalog, Cosmos DB, Snowflake, everything. Okay, but I think we are, for the purpose of this session, we're going to focus on Azure SQL DB, right? So let me click on that. So it will open a dialog for you, right? So once you enable your system assigned managed identity, you need to choose your connect to your database. That's the first thing we need to do, right? As a part of mirroring. So let me click on this Azure SQL DB. And I think you need to bring in your, let's say, SQL Server. So let us copy that. Give me a moment. So it'll be a quick demo. We will do that. So I'll go to my SQL database. Okay, right now it's in a pause state because Microsoft is providing free SQL DB uh, up to some capacity limit. Okay. Uh, so I think if you're not using it for some time, it will be moved to pause state almost instantly, but I think we can bring it back if you're trying to connect. Okay, so but let me copy the server name, and you have to paste the server information and then the DB information. It is test DB 401. Okay, so I have a connection already, which I know I'm directly connect, but let me show you what are the different options that you have if you're trying to create a new connection from scratch. So the connection name, you can give whatever you want, and data gateway, if any, but we're not going to touch that. The authentication kind, you can use basic SQL or the organizational account or service principal. So I'm going to use my organizational account, and I'm also going to switch to my different account to establish connection. So that will open the dialog, and then I'm switching the connection, to my other login, and it's always encrypted when you're trying to connect. So let's click on connect. It takes a moment to establish the connection. That's the reason I've already mirrored and then kept it for you to have a look at it. But we'll also see uh, once the connection is established, you will get another window to choose different tables. I mean that you can plan to mirror, right? So let's try and see quickly. And I think they're still improving the product, because what I experienced so far, the connection is taking a bit of time that you can see to establish the connection. Maybe for the first time, it needs to, go through a lot of process in the background. As I said, once the system assigned managed identity is enabled, I know it will generate that application identity or object in the intra ID. So then I think when you're trying to establish connection from Fabric, it will try and authenticate and then get the token, fetch the token, and then authenticate against intra ID, right? So that process will probably, that's why it's taking a bit of time to establish the connection. There you go. It's getting connected, I guess. It took almost a minute. So maybe I think Microsoft can focus on improving that connectivity part. Maybe we can let them know in the community so that they can improve the product. But you can see it's connected and it says new mirrored Azure SQL database, and then you can start choosing the data. And I think a couple of things to note here. There is a information here on top. Only valid columns are replicated because there are some limitations I talked about. We will go through that in documentation quickly. Uh, because as I said, now the primary key isn't a problem, but um, if there are other restrictions, you won't be able to mirror those tables, right? So you have to be careful. And I think this is a valid error. I'll tell you why. Since I already mirrored the same SQL database, right, you'll not be able to mirror again, right? It's possible only once. So the database cannot be mirrored. The database has already been mirrored to another Fabric warehouse. So even if it's in different warehouse or lakehouse, or uh, if I've already mirrored, it won't allow you to mirror again. So there is no point of mirroring it again, right? So that's a valid error that you're seeing. But just to showcase, how you can establish connection, and then once you click on connect after choosing your data, there you can see I have only one table, which is mirroring test table that I've already mirrored. So you can select or choose the tables that you want to mirror. If you don't want to mirror the entire database, right? That's always possible. Okay, you can choose the data. And I think any future tables that you want to mirror, you need to make sure the checkbox is checked here. So automatically mirror future tables. Any new tables added to the source will be replicated to the destination. Otherwise, if there is, for some reason, if you don't want to mirror your future tables, you can always uncheck this. Microsoft is allowing that. It is not like, it is something you can't control, right? So you can always control that for some reason, okay? And then if you click on connect, the connectivity will be established, okay? But I'm not going to click on connect now. I can't do that. Even it is throwing me an error, which is valid. Okay, let me close this and cancel. Okay, so the same database that I've just shown you is already mirrored. So we will have a look at it. So what is the type of that and other information that's showing up here? So the test DB 101, it is a mirror database. How we can identify? You can see like, I don't know how to describe that icon, but the right arrow, left arrow, kind of a mirroring kind of a thing you can see at the bottom right. So that tells you it's a mirror database, okay, mirror database item. And couple of artifacts automatically created, which is semantic model. I told you the default semantic model. But if you want to expand it or wanted to create your own model, you can always do that. It's not necessarily you need to work on that default model only. But Microsoft is giving you a kind of a bootstrapped semantic model for you to get started. That's it. And the SQL Analytics endpoint as well for you to write some T-SQL queries right away and start working on your data, right? So let me get into, okay, let me click on the mirror database item. Okay, that will open up a window like this. So now where there are a lot of controls around here. Okay, so to stop the replication, you can configure the replication. So in case in future, if you don't want the future tables to be mirrored, even after mirroring, you can control that and apply the changes. You can configure that. Okay, it is possible. And it says, on the top, because, here it is just the monitoring part that you're seeing. But if you want to work on the data, you have to navigate to the SQL Analytics endpoint for SQL querying, and a default Power BI semantic model for reporting were created with this item, the couple of artifacts that were created. And you can start, you can navigate from here also to start querying your database and then make sense of your data, right? And it tells you source correction, source, and the mirror database ID, and the monitoring part here, which is the thing crucial, right? So you can see the status is running up and running already, and the tables that are mirrored from the Azure SQL DB. Okay, only one table I have in my source Azure SQL database, which is mirroring test, and that is up and running with a couple of rows running. So in the last completed time as well. So in case if you're seeing, let's say, if you want the data to be synced till date, and if you're seeing a past date, then there'll be a problem, right? So you may need to troubleshoot if there is anything stopping the sync and so on and so forth. Okay, but that's the monitoring part. Okay, we'll come to it again. But okay, so configuration we looked at. So let me go back. So here you can always switch between the mirror database and the SQL Analytics endpoint, or you can navigate from here, however you want, right? So you can always switch to the SQL Analytics endpoint, and you should see the tables that we mirrored already in OneLake into Fabric. So if I click on DBO tables, so I'm within the SQL Analytics endpoint experience, and here I can start previewing the data, and you can start writing the queries, and then do whatever analysis that you need to do with T-SQL experience. So only a couple of test data, okay, nothing much as a part of testing. So I added one more row and checked whether the sync is happening fine, okay, but we're not going to add rows and check it now. So it should be fine, okay. And I think you can start writing queries, or let me run some sample queries, just a select top to see if that is working. Okay, so that's perfectly all right. So you can start building your queries around your data and then initiate your analysis. Okay, so that's SQL Analytics endpoint. And I think, as I said, reporting part, you can always create new report, new semantic model, or if you want to manage your default semantic model, you can always do that to work on your data models and then generate the reports for analytical needs. Okay, that's a quick demo. Okay, so a few more things to ensure before we move on. So let me come back to the presentation. Okay, so let me present this again. So I think the setup part, we had a quick look. Okay, so I think it's a good point, good opportunity to talk about the primary key part, right? So let me navigate to, give me a minute, sorry. Under, I think, limitations. So I don't know exactly where I saw that, maybe under limitations. Okay, we'll come to that probably, I think okay, that's fine. I think limitations, I guess, or FAQ. Yeah, there you go, at the table level limitation. Where I saw that. Okay, there you go. I think this is what I wanted to show you. So starting in April 2025, a table can be mirrored even if it doesn't have a primary key. I think before, until April 2025, there was a restriction. So if you don't have your primary key on the table, it won't be mirrored. Okay, but I think they lifted this restriction. But there is a key thing you need to know. If you have already mirrored your database prior to April 2025, okay, the existing tables without primary keys won't be automatically added to the mirroring. Okay, that's important in case if I've already mirrored. So I think to initiate the process back, I think you need to either stop and start the replication process to make sure the existing tables that you already mirror, even without primary keys, are also getting mirrored. So I think you're getting the point, right? Because they recently lifted that restriction. Okay, so you need to keep that in mind if you have already mirror your tables that doesn't have a primary key. So just stop and start, then it will take effect. Okay, it will start mirroring those tables as well. Okay, so that's one thing I wanted to highlight. And coming back to presentation, we will look at few things in presentation and come back to documentation. Well, I think some key differences that you need to know. Okay, so Azure SQL, as you have seen, it requires manual setup. What you need to do, you need to enable system assign manage identity, and then make a connection, select your tables, and then mirror your database, and then look at the monitoring part. So some part of manual setup is required. But what in case of Fabric SQL DB? There is the SQL DB experience. Microsoft recently launched Fabric SQL Database for operational purposes. So that DB, if you're creating, it is auto mirror. So there is no point of mirroring the native source, right? Native SQL DB, which is already in OneLake. So it doesn't make any sense to talk about mirroring for SQL DB, right? Which is within the Fabric experience. So it is auto mirrored, right? And I think as a part of troubleshooting, we will come back to this again, but I wanted to highlight this now. In case if there are sync issues in your mirroring, right? You need to look for long-running transactions in your Azure SQL database, right? Because I think when you start mirroring in the backend under the hood, what's happening is it look at the transaction logs, and then see if there is any new tables are coming in, and then start replicating, right? So there is some process which we are not going to get into detail, but the transactional log uh, kind of check will happen frequently, very frequently in near real time, right? And in case if you have any active transactions that are running in Azure SQL database that is holding up the truncation of the log transactional logs, right? Then that will be a problem. Okay, so you need to make sure there is no long running transactions in Azure SQL database. Even if that is happening, you cannot expect the mirroring to happen almost instantly, right? It will try and look at the transactional log very frequently, and if you have a long running transaction, then I think that's something you need to watch out for, right? So that's one key thing which I wanted to highlight, which is very important from the enterprise setup perspective. It is always possible you might have some long running transactions running in Azure SQL database in the enterprise setting. And you need to be aware, okay, so I need to be probably wait for some time for the mirroring to happen or sync to happen. And I cannot expect and worry about why the sync is not happening when I have a long running transaction running in the background, right, in the source systems. So that you need to keep in mind, okay, which I wanted to highlight in the key differences section. Okay, let me move on. And I think query we talked about and semantic access also we talked about. Okay, so there is the SQL Analytics endpoint that is ready for you to query with the T-SQL experience to analyze your data. And shortcuts, it's usable in Lakehouse and Power BI as well. And default semantic model is generated for you. You can create your own model if you want, or you can manage your existing default model. Well, I think now comes the part we talk about limitations. Okay, so especially from Azure SQL database point of view, right? So give me a moment, just give me a second. Let me drink some water. Allow me a minute. Okay, so I think I have not put down everything in the deck. Okay, so I have highlighted few things, but we'll navigate to Microsoft documentation to look at different limitations across database tables. I think, we'll talk about it quickly. Okay. The first thing which you need to keep in mind is read only. Okay, so the mirror tables in Fabric is read only. You cannot control or update, you cannot do any operations on that data. It is purely read only. And that's only for analytical purposes to generate your reports. You're just doing the replication and it's read only. That's the first thing you need to keep in mind, right now. Maybe in future, Microsoft may come up with some capability, but at the moment, as of now, in this webinar, it is only read only. Okay. And I think no transformations, which is key thing, because we are talking about zero ETL, right? But there are no transformations that you can do during mirroring. Only the replication, it's kind of a copying, right? So duplicating your data into OneLake in Delta Lake format. So you cannot do any transformation. In case if you need to apply some transformations to your data, then mirroring is not the solution. Okay, so that you need to keep in mind. When you need to go for mirroring, when you need to go for your ETL approach, building pipelines and all. So you cannot do any transformations during mirroring. You can just make a connection, mirror it, keep the data readily available in SQL Analytics endpoint, and then the semantic models you can build and then start generating the reports real quick. Okay, and I think there is this limit of max 500 tables per mirror, as I told you. You cannot, if you have more than 500 tables, sorry, you cannot do that at the moment. You can max mirror only 500 tables in a database per mirror at the moment. And I think there is a SQL endpoint. It excludes some unsupported types like varchar, max, and all. But I think it's not the only thing which we have it in detail. So let me quickly move on to Microsoft documentation with respect to limitations. So I cannot bring in all those into my deck. That's a lot to cover, we'll quickly go through. So I think with respect to, so you can see there are a lot of other workloads, but we are purely focusing on Azure SQL Database limitations here. I think I'll highlight few because I cannot go through everything because there is a lot which you can go through later. But I think the key thing I wanted to highlight at the database level and the table level. Okay, I think at the database level, the key thing which you need to remember, and if the change data capture is enabled, right, you cannot mirror. So in case if the CDC is enabled or Azure Synapse link for SQL is enabled, or the database is already mirrored in another, that we have already seen in action, right? So it is already mirrored, so you cannot mirror it again. But in case if you have CDC enabled and Azure Synapse link for SQL is enabled, you cannot mirror the database, which you need to keep in mind. And the max 500 tables limit we have just looked in the deck. The maximum number of tables that can be mirrored is 500 tables, right? So that's the thing that you need to mirror, keep in mind. Otherwise, if you have it under 500 tables, then that should be okay, right? So even in an enterprise setting, if they don't have more than 500, it's perfectly all right to mirror, right? And that's at the database level. And I think we're not going to talk about permissions and all. I'll leave it to you, go through in detail in the interest of time. And I think network and connectivity part are also crucial. I told you about the system assigned managed identity that you need to enable in the first part, and that must be the primary identity, okay, for you to establish the connection. Okay, and uh, I think mirroring across tenants is not supported as well. Okay, that you need to probably keep in mind as well. Okay. And I think at the table level, I think there is a lot at table level that you need to look at. So it cannot be mirrored if the primary key is one of the database like SQL variant. There are some restrictions around data types if the primary keys of these data types, okay, and other information at column level as well. But I'll leave it to you. Go through that. I think there are some precision limits as well. Okay, so that you need to only 6 digits of precision. Delta Lake supports. So those are some of the restrictions you need to look at the table level. But I think one key thing I think in a large kind of fact table kind of a setup, you might have a clustered column store index for operational efficiency, right? For the table efficiency. So that is not supported. If you have a clustered column store indexes, I think you cannot mirror that table, I guess. You can try that out. But I think as per Microsoft documentation, it is not currently supported at the moment. What else? I think there is a lot of things that you need to go through, but I think this I have already highlighted. Okay, it is not necessarily after April 2025. Even if it doesn't have any primary key in your table, you can still mirror it. Okay, but if you have already mirrored it prior to that, make sure you stop the replication and then start, so that it will take effect. Otherwise, you won't see that table. Okay, even after April 2025. Now we are in July, right? So if you have already explored this capability before April 2025, okay, that's for someone who already leveraged this uh, prior to April 2025. Okay, at the column level also there are some restrictions. If the source table has computed columns, then those columns cannot be mirrored in family OneLake. So you might have some computed columns, you might have some DAX expressions in the model, or you have already pre-computed columns in the table, right? So in case if you are doing any pre-computed columns, that won't be mirrored. Okay, so that you need to keep in mind. So I think there are a lot of restrictions at the database level, table level, column level, which you need to be aware even before jumping onto mirroring. Okay, otherwise there is no point of mirroring it and then complaining, okay, I can't see this table, I can't see that database, I can't see this table, which is my 550th table, right? So keep this restrictions in mind, limitations. So I'll share this link in the chat. Okay, let me share that. Okay, give me a minute. So I'll put the link in the chat. So you can go through the limitations, okay, in detail at the column level. And I think there are a lot of regional level restrictions also that you can see here. Right now it is supported, the mirroring is supported in all of these regions. Maybe if you're in a different region than this, then you'll not be able to explore the capability. So just go through this in detail when you have some time, and maybe feel free to reach out to me if any questions. Okay. So that's on the limitations part. We will quickly talk about troubleshooting and then the FAQs as well, and then we will take up some questions. Okay. So I can see only Satish is there. Maybe you can feel free to ask some questions once the presentation is done. Let me present again. Okay, so use cases, we talked about it. It is only read-only access to mirror tables for analytical use case needs. And you can do across source federated queries, which means like across lakehouse, you can make a connection from your mirror database and then perform those joins, and you can do the cross source queries to run your T-SQL queries and establish, look at the data. Okay, once the mirroring is done. And a few more points. I think there is support for a lot of databases, not only Azure SQL databases, for Oracle, Postgre, external SQL DBs. But for the scope of this session, as I mentioned, we're looking at Azure SQL DB, and it also has improved semantic mirroring capabilities and public APIs for open mirroring. We talked a bit about it, but we're not going to dive into it. You can read more about it, or in another opportunity, we will dive into it with respect to open mirroring. Okay, so I think we looked at a quick demo for Azure SQL DB, and then we saw some sample select queries, how we can explore analytics endpoint. I'm not going to build some reports, but you can always leverage the existing data model, default model, or you can build your own semantic models to generate some reports. And I think the performance tuning tips is quite critical. We are going to quickly look at that, the monitoring and the troubleshooting part. We talked a bit about it, but we'll quickly look at the reviewing part, which is crucial after to make sure sync is fine. The sync behavior is perfectly all right. Okay. So okay, so I think there are a few benefits to quickly highlight. So no complex ETL pipelines, we talked about it, and there is this unified analytics experience across your multiple data sources, and it enables you to make faster decisions with up-to-date insights, and schema changes handled automatically where supported, and it's almost near real-time data availability for you in OneLake. Okay, you need to make sure the sync is fine, otherwise it's near real-time, and it reduces the load or pressure on the source systems, right? So you no need to talk to your underlying data for your analytical systems, right? So you can mirror it, and then you can generate your reports by reducing pressure on the source systems. And seamless integration with Power BI and Lakehouse as well once the database is mirrored. So let's move on. Okay, quickly talk about the comparison. We touched a bit about it, right? So you can use mirroring for near real-time operational reporting. And if you need custom transformations, you cannot use mirroring. You have to go for custom Dataflow Gen 2 or be it PySpark notebooks. You need to perform those custom transformations. But in mirroring, it is not possible. And you use pipelines for scheduled orchestrated batch loads, and mirroring is best only for read-only analytics use case, which is quite critical. Okay, so if you need your data readily available in Fabric, just bring your data with mirroring and then start generating reports, build your semantic models and then start generating reports, establish the relationships in your semantic model and then generate it. Okay. And best practices for mirroring, let's talk a bit about it. So I think we touched upon it already. Prefer managed identity for secure access, enable your system assign managed identity and then make a connection so that an entry will be created in entry ID, and then you can when you're trying to authenticate from other services, it will fetch the token from entry ID and then authenticate the other services to bring the data into Fabric. And ensure your tables have primary keys, but it's not a problem at the moment, maybe prior to April 2025. And avoid white tables with unsupported types. As I mentioned, there are a lot of limitations you need to keep in mind. And regularly monitor sync status from Fabric Workspace and look for any issues. And you can use your semantic models to enrich your data analysis. Those are the best practices for mirroring. And I think let's talk a bit about troubleshooting before we move on to QA. Okay, there are a few things which I wanted to show you after the session as well. I'll show you in case if you're interested. So monitoring the sync status is really required, okay, regularly, and you can use the SQL endpoint logs to verify updates and check for schema mismatches for or any access issues. And as I mentioned already, you have to investigate any long-running transaction if the sync lags. Okay, so let me come back. Okay, so let me come back to quickly come back to the troubleshooting part. So we'll quickly go through a few. Okay, so how we can do the troubleshooting. Okay, so there are a lot. Microsoft already mentioned the cause, result, and the resolution. You can go through that in case if the workspace is deleted, the mirroring stops automatically. Okay, so that you need to know. Okay, but I think let's talk about the queries that you can use for troubleshooting. So if you're experiencing any mirroring problems, there are some DMVs, okay, the dynamic management views that you can run to look at the transactional logs, okay, the change logs. So you can run this query that you can see here. Select star from this DM change feed log scan sessions in your SQL database, and then see if it shows up anything. Okay, that will tell you if you have any problem with mirroring. Okay, if it doesn't show any progress or processing on processing incremental changes, then I think you can look for errors as well in this DMV. Okay, so there are a couple of queries that you can run T-SQL query to the DMV against your database and see if there is anything that's stopping the sync that you need to be aware of, right? In case if there aren't any issues reported, you can run the following stored procedure to review the current configuration. You can look at the current configuration of the mirrored SQL database to check if it's properly enabled or not with this SP as well. Okay, so there are a lot of other things that you need to make sure. I think you can go through that. Okay, but I think one thing is to real quick, I can show that. So in the mirror database item, click on the three dots and say manage permissions and make sure this managed identity that we enable. Okay, so that's what Microsoft is mentioning here. If the replication is still not working, verify the correct SAMI object as permissions. So in the Fabric portal, go to manage permissions and confirm that logical SQL server name shows read-write permissions that you can see here. So this is my logical SQL server name, testdb101, and it has read-write permissions already. If you're not seeing this, then it is a problem. Probably you need to check your system assigned managed identity if it's correctly configured or not, or some other problem as well. Okay, so that you need to make sure with respect to troubleshooting about managed identity. I think that's what I wanted to highlight with troubleshooting, and I think there is this FAQ as well, which you can go through to close the session. I think we are already crossing the time. I'll also share this link for the FAQ. So there are a lot of things that you can make sure that you can go through. Okay, so how long does it take to replicate? It's near real time. Does it currently support views, external tables? No, only regular tables. And I think there are a lot of things. Okay, self-help, you can see, we have just seen. How do I know Fabric is replicating data on my SQL database? You can run the DMVs and then make sure it is working fine. Okay. Okay, I'll also share this FAQ in the chat. Oh, sorry. Okay, well, so I think we can close the session. I think we are already running past the time, but quickly to show you, give me a moment. I think as a closing, okay, so let me present this again. Okay, so I hope this session helps you. Okay, with respect to Fabric mirroring, especially Azure SQL DB, we looked at, in summary, we looked at what Fabric mirroring is, why we need mirroring, and we looked at the limitations. We looked at, we did a quick demo to see how we can mirror it and how we can monitor it. And then I think we also looked at the prerequisites part, before you even mirror it. So I hope this session is helpful. And I think in DataVion Academy, we are offering membership tiers. If you're interested, we have basic tier and pro tier. Um, Basic tier, we are charging $10 per month, and we have a 14 days free trial, which you can In a couple of weeks, you can see how you will get access to all the 3 course bundle. You will access to weekly live inner circle calls like this, the deep dives focused on fabric topics. And the call recordings will also be available to you, and you can participate in community polls to vote on any future session topics, and the comment-based support for follow-up questions. In the pro tier, along with whatever you have in basic, plus you'll get Clara or DWON's flagship AI tutor for instant learning support. And you'll have access to all the demo files, slide decks, SQL scripts, notebooks, everything. And you'll have a separate private community access, and then the priority access to new features, beta content, and hands-on challenges. So I'll paste the link in the chat, or in the next slide I have the QR codes which you can scan. So we have basic monthly, basic yearly. You have some discounts if you're going for yearly, and then the pro tier monthly is $25, and if you go for yearly, you'll have some discounts as well. So feel free to scan this QR code, and then you can it will take you directly to the checkout page to join. Okay, subscribe and then join the DWN Academy membership. And I think this is nothing. You'll get, we are going to provide you a lot of value over the time. So let me know in case if there is any checkout issue. So you can scan the QR code right away. I have 4 different QR codes displayed here. You can scan and then subscribe to the membership. Okay. So that being said, thank you for joining. I hope this session is helpful. I'll see you in another. I'll see you in the another session. Thank you and take care.